What is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York. We are back at the Gramercy Theater, and this time we got round 3 with Chris and Ben of Shadow of Intent. Great to be able to talk with you guys. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us, man.
Yeah, anytime, man, anytime. I'm so happy to see you guys headlining the Gramercy Theater tonight. It feels like only yesterday you were on that Despised Icon, Kublai Khan, and Ingested show, and now you guys are headlining it. First question is, how has this headline tour been going so far? It seems like there's been a lot of joy coming out of it, right? I've seen pictures. It's been insane.
Yeah, super good. We started doing VIPs, which have been going super well. Brought out a lot of new merch we never had. Everyone seems to like that a lot. So overall, it's been a really great experience.
The new album, Elegy, is absolutely amazing. And, when I listen to Primordial, to Reclaimer, to Melancholy, to this, it's getting harder and harder to pick, like, a favorite song or a favorite album. Was the intention of Elegy to just pick up where you left off after Melancholy, or was this signifying, like, a new beginning for Shadow of Intent?
I mean, I'm not sure if Chris would agree on this, but my perception has kind of been Melancholy was its own thing away from the first two albums, and Elegy is also kind of its own thing. But I think, we might stick with this thing from now on, maybe.
Right. It's musically sort of a continuation of Melancholy, kind of in the sense that it's very orchestrally based, more than ever, more epic soundtrack type stuff. But yeah, this one maybe a little slower than some of the others, and so in a way it's sort of its own thing. It's its own special album with progressive stuff going on, and yeah, so it depends on perspective, but yeah.
Was this like a preconceived vision to kind of go into this direction? Like, were you envisioning this from back even in the Primordial days, or was this just kind of like a very natural, it was just kind of like it just sort of happened that way in a very experimental process?
I mean, I think we always wanted to get to the level where, we're writing albums that we feel like are up to par with our standards of what like orchestral deathcore or death metal, sorry.
Do you feel like this expresses a different concept, especially being like Elegy, the title track kind of has like 3 parts behind it? Is there a specific subject matter or a concept that's being addressed that wasn't necessarily addressed in the previous 3 albums?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the theme of Elegy itself is all based around historical and modern warfare and how past atrocities are still being committed today, but they're kind of more under the radar. And like things like World War II. You can look at almost comparable things happening in Ukraine today, and even though it was written just before all that kicked off, it technically hasn't been this brand new event. It's been brooding for years, and so have all these other things. So that's those 3 songs. Kind of tie the rest of the album together, being like, oh, hey, these songs are about these past events, but in these 3 songs, we're going to talk about how this is still going on today and how you should, pay attention because these things could happen to you someday.
Yeah. And I saw you guys on the Cannibal Whitechapel Revocation tour like the day the invasion happened. So and listening back to Elegy, like it definitely brought in like a very unsettling aspect behind it. Did this concept and this lyrical idea maybe Chris help you dictate your hand with how you compose the music as well?
I would say most of the music was made before we fully got the concepts together. So I guess not especially.
Did you feel because like when I would listen to an earlier song such as The Return or The Horror Within or something like that, was the meaning sort of like a little bit more personal, or were you kind of looking at like external elements such as warfare for the making of those albums as well?
Yeah, that was mostly just external stuff. Melancholy was more so the personal type record, but kind of written in a vague context to let you kind of imagine what you're hearing rather than thinking about what I'm saying in a way, I guess, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm. Is there a time where, or is it fair to say that you prefer to, like, make the albums more metaphorical in a way on a personal level, or do you, like, use the music as a sheer escapism, if you will?
I guess a bit of both. I mean, there's songs. It kind of depends on the part. There's some parts where I feel like it's good to be straightforward, and then there's parts where I feel like it adds to, I guess, the dynamic of it. If you kind of be more dramatic with what you're saying, I guess, and how you're delivering it.
Mm-hmm. For your guitar soloing, Chris, because the way 1 minute you know how to like sustain notes and really make it sort of like echo, if you will, and then there's parts that are like all out shredding. Is like the soloing almost reflective of an emotion in a way that you were feeling, or like a form of expression, if you will?
Yeah, I think the solos on this in particular were less about being insanity, less insanity than say the first album, and more about expression and some uplifting emotions. But yeah, mostly just for me was thinking more outside the box than I felt I did from that first album, and continue to explore and build on the music.
Did you prefer to like have, when it comes to this solos in particularly, do you prefer if like there's already music like written so you like know what key you're sort of working in a way, or has there ever been a time where you had like a whole solo or chord progression that would help influence the rest of the song?
Yeah, I don't think I've ever written a solo first. I think usually the key and the song are first, and then the solo gets written somewhere in that song. If there's only one solo, sometimes there's more than one.
When it comes to the songwriting process, is it better if everybody in the band is sort of like on the same page in terms of the idea, or do you want or could your different experiences and different ideas maybe actually help influence the songwriting if you kind of all are in your like diverse headspaces?
We're still sorting that out. Obviously, in the past, it's been very heavy-handed between me and him, and we've kind of been trying to find out more ways where the other guys can be involved a little more, and we're still figuring out the best ways to make that happen.
Being that isolation is such a great fuel for creativity when it comes to thinking of ideas, do you guys prefer to be like more alone in your own little element, or do you prefer to write when you're in the company of each other?
Now you go first.
It kind of just depends, honestly. There's some songs where I can just sit down at home and I'll write them, and then there's some songs where I get really stumped and I'll be like, I need your guys, advice on this or that, and we'll go meet up and we'll hash it out together, and it's always great. There's never any con to doing it, really. So I mean, both are good.
Yeah, that's actually a good way to put it. It just depends if we get stuck or not, and if we get stuck, we need some help,
It's cool that you're able to rely on each other though when you do get stuck. And is there like an art to like escaping like an artist block in a way? I've always wondered like how an artist could put a song aside and come back to it later if they're feeling differently than when they first started it,
Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's not possible, but sometimes it works out well, and there's definitely been songs that are several years old that can get uncovered and finished, and some that just die.
I've always wondered if like the longer you work on something, the harder it is to sort of like capture that moment, if you will.
I don't know. What would you say?
Yeah, what would I say? It's all very dependent on the song. I think some songs I can finish years later and have a new perspective that I didn't have back then, and sometimes what I was singing back then, I could never get back to that, so the song never gets finished.
You wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a lot of benefit actually. Sometimes to sitting on certain material and then coming back to it. I mean, it's not really relevant to Shadow of Intent, but I mean, I just was thinking there has been a project that I've worked on and have worked on for years now where we just have done nothing and then came back and suddenly we're able to write things that nobody was able to think of for years before. So, I mean, like if it were to happen in this band, I'm sure that, we could probably pull it off the same way. I've never really seen us get too stuck on anything so far.
I could tell. It seems like the music that you make, especially since all 4 albums came out in such like a short period of time, it almost seems like that there is sort of like a flow that's been going. In order to like get that inspiration, does like inspiration just strike out of the blue for songwriting, or do you all have kind of like usual places that you go to in order to cultivate ideas?
There's definitely an element of you have to set aside the time for the day to make it happen. Like if you just let your day get caught up in other stuff, then it kind of just doesn't happen. So there is part of it is just making the time to do it. But definitely if you can feel inspired that day, that's great. But sometimes if you're not feeling inspired, you can get inspired just by taking a crack at it for like a half hour. And sometimes it's not happening, but sometimes sitting down and trying, you can become inspired while you're doing it.
And being that you also are referencing a lot of war and historical elements with Elegy, is there almost maybe like a lot of research that's involved when it came to like the lyricism and what you wanted to address in it? Or is it almost kind of like your interpretation and your own specific messaging?
It was definitely based on like a factual representation. But I wouldn't say that I went out and researched anything to write the songs. It's all been stuff that I've been researching like since I was a little kid. So it was like, there's all this stuff happening. I can talk about this now, and I can write a song about this. Okay, well, let's do that then. So I just kind of picked events that seemed the most topically relevant with some of the things that are going on today, and tried to think of how I could phrase it into the rhythm of the song, and if it didn't work, then I would go on to the next one, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I just find it kind of ironic because I've always thought that your music sounded so futuristic, so like to bring in these different elements of the past, I thought is almost kind of makes you stand out in this realm of like symphonic death metal and symphonic deathcore, if you will.
I mean, yeah, that's very appreciated. I mean, yeah, because I guess when you consider our first album being all about, sci-fi and, there's planets and alien ships on the cover and whatnot, and then we're talking about World War II, years later. It's quite a contrast. But I mean, I feel like with now that, Chris has been writing more orchestrally based music, that it fits kind of well with the sound, the more grandeur, like I don't even know how to explain it per se, but I don't know. I feel like it just fits with what he's doing, and I hope that people like it as much as we enjoy doing it.
Definitely. Do you want your music to be open to interpretation, or could a listener maybe also make up their own conclusions behind what Shadow of Intent is?
I mean, yeah. If people want to make their own conclusions, that's great. When I wrote Melancholy, I was hoping that most people would kind of do that, because there's almost like multi-meanings behind each song. With Elegy, I mean, it's basically just written off of human experience, which, I mean, you can take that, you can perceive that anyway, we might perceive it differently. So, I mean, I think that with Elegy, you can still, get that benefit, and I hope that people can anyways.
Yeah. And going back to the instrumentation too, with the orchestral elements and stuff, is there like, do you feel like with having this multiple form of instrumentation, it's almost expressing different sides of, I know you don't tend to bring your personal lives into the music so much, but is it almost still representing different sides of you in a way with orchestration versus, some of the most intense riffing?
Yeah, at the very least, it brings out, my desire for variety, and, not trying to do the same stuff every time I do something, because my life is very surrounded by music at all times. So since I can't really change that, not that I want to change it, but while it's happening, I want that itself to have variety so that it's not monotonous,
Yeah, definitely. And a few more questions regarding to your live presence. I talked about how if you bring in songs from different albums, if that changes the meaning at all. But when you like are playing, like a Reclaimer song, for example, does it almost put you back in the mindsets of who you were in 2017? Does Melancholy almost put you back in the mindset of where you were in 2019 in a way?
Sometimes it does. And then sometimes I'm just up there thinking like, how much easier it is to do some of these songs now versus back then, and just kind of reminds myself, keep going. We've come this far.
Yeah, it definitely like makes me think of the journey, because some of those old songs I thought would be like impossible to ever play live. They were like computer songs, and I'm like, wow, I've like worked hard and I can actually pull these off now. I was afraid we'd just never play these live, but so if anything, it brings back some memories, but also like, yeah, like the progression of just what we've been working for.
It almost seems like the songs evolve over time as you guys have evolved too, in a way.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
And have you ever thought about maybe playing with a live symphony? I really would love to see that happen. I could definitely see Shadow of Intent at Lincoln Center or Carnegie Hall as much as I could see you here at Gramercy Theater.
We've definitely had some jokes and thoughts about it. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's just a matter of when, hopefully, because the logistics involved in that are immense. But I'd say it is a goal everyone has, I think. It just might take a while.
I'm sure the people watching this, like any violinists, anybody who plays cello, orchestra, anything like that, just please hit up Shadow of Intent. We need to make that live thing happen. And finally, is there at all like a similar energy that you channel into your live presence as you do when you're songwriting? Is there anything that ties those two arts together, or do you consider them two completely separate forms of self-expression?
I would say two completely different forms. When I'm writing music, I'm very focused on being rhythmic and capturing energy, I guess. Whereas when performing, I'm just in this primal mindset where I'm like basically just exploding and vocals are coming out of me. So yeah, two completely different experiences.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because I'm writing it all at my computer, and more than 2/3 of what I do, I'm probably not even touching the guitar. I'm like moving stuff around on the computer. So yeah, take the computer away and it's all guitar. You have to, try to turn that around and make it a different beast in itself.
Yeah. Do you almost have to like practice crowd interaction or stage presence as much as the material in a way?
Right. I think in a way, yeah. I mean, it's maybe not practice, but it's something that maybe gets more comfortable and better the more you do it.
Yeah, it's always usually good to think about what you're going to do also, like way ahead of time, just so you don't get caught up in the moment and be like, oh, what do I do? What do I say?
Yeah.
So that's something that I sometimes do that helps me out, especially with the longer sets like on this tour.
Yeah, it seems like you plan a lot of things out, both stage presence and you have your your computer aspects, which I think is cool. You hear a lot of like old timers say they do that on the computer. That's not real rock and roll or whatever. But I mean, like it works very well for your favor. Like you don't think that at all? Like planning ahead or computerizing stuff. You don't think just to prove the other people wrong? That still maintains, in my opinion, very organic energy. I still think Shadow of Intent's a very organic band. But for people who may think that working behind the computer isn't organic, do you have kind of like, in a way, like a rebuttal to that or something like that?
Well, I think for starters, for the last 30 years, doing a recording without a computer, I don't know if 30 years is the exact number, but that's just kind of a necessity, and that's just part of what a recording is getting it onto the computer for arranging the tracks and mixing the tracks and stuff like that. So, yeah, I would say that's, if I'm not doing it, someone else would be doing it for us, Yeah.
Fair enough. That's actually a really good way of putting it. Anytime somebody wants to complain about like the backing tracks or like the computer aspects, like if we weren't doing it, somebody else would be doing it. And I think it adds more to the nature. I think it's there's some people, for some bands, less is more, but for Shadow of Intent, the more the merrier. That's how I look at it.
Yeah, I mean, we try to find a good middle ground between modern production and, you know, natural sounding production, I guess you could say, like finding, you know, non overly edited guitars, you know, doing the live drums and keeping the vocals, you know, more natural sounding. I feel like works for what we're doing.
Yeah, and I also think it's common too in this style, as we've been seeing with bands like Lorna Shore or even Flesh God Apocalypse, which a little bit older, but you know still kind of was able to foresee that. But bands like Enterprise Earth and Fit for an Autopsy have been doing it. It almost seems like, would you say that Shadow of Intent and Lorna Shore and all these different bands this is almost kind of like a new movement in a way? It almost seems like it's the modern day symphony that we're going to be seeing.
Yes, I didn't see it a few years ago, but now looking back, because it's hard to take it seriously when everything's so small scale, but now that everything is on a bigger scale than it was, you can kind of take a step back and see the movement where it is. Just it's hard to take it seriously as a movement when every band was, you know, just getting started and so small you don't really see what's happening.
Yeah. Or like somebody makes up a genre and you go on Wikipedia of that genre and there's like only 2 bands on that whole page. So, yep. But one day there needs to be a Shadow of Intent, like Lorna Shore, like Broadway musical. That needs to happen one day. I could definitely.
That would be crazy.
Yeah, I could just see the return opening up, and as you know, the orchestral is happening, the curtain opens up, and right into the ultimate play.
Classic song.
Hell yeah. So before we go, I want to thank you both so much for your time, and congratulations too. It feels like only yesterday I was speaking to you guys in 2017 on
man, for real. Thank you.
Yeah, on the Black Dahlia show. I can't believe that was. It's going to be 6 years ago in like a few months. But is there just anything else that you'd like to promote for Shadow of Intent for the future with the release of Elegy?
Yeah, we'll be doing 2 Christmas shows. We'll be doing August Burns Red Christmas show and Lorna Shore's Christmas show, and then touring Europe in January, and then we'll be announcing some more stuff as well.
Looking forward to hearing more. Thank you guys so much. Everybody, Shadow of Intent, Elegy, it is out now. Be sure to pick it up. We will see you next time on Heavy New York.